Thank you very much for staying with News Central. Now, let's turn our attention to Ethiopia's repeated struggle to build a stable democracy. The country has attempted democratic transitions at least twice. The first in 1991, when the old military regime was overthrown. Then in 2018, when Abiy Ahmed became Prime Minister. And there was renewed optimism, opening space for opposition and bold reforms. Both bids, however, faltered. But is a third chance possible? The challenges are many: deep ethnic divisions, contested federalism, weak institution, some say elite capture, constitutional ambiguity, unresolved conflicts like what we see in Tigray, and a political culture that too often leans towards forced dialogue. But failure, as they say, is not inevitability. In this second half of One Slot, we'll ask what conditions must be met for democracy to take root in Ethiopia, what role elites, institutions, civil society, and external actors must play. How can Ethiopia's third bid avoid the traps of the past? To help us with this conversation, we have Maebel Gebremedhin, I beg your pardon, President of United Women of the Horn Tigray Action Committee. Apologize for murdering your name. Thank you for giving us your time.
No, it's totally fine. I appreciate that attempt.
Thank you. All right, let's take a look at what has happened. We know that Ethiopia endured 17-year civil war, and their first break forward democracy came in 1991. For civil rule, I beg your pardon. Now, looking back, what common patterns, or should we say lessons, can be drawn from the country's 1991 transition and the 2018 reform efforts?
Sure. So I think there are some parallels, one of them being the amount of violence. And so in both situations, violence was the answer to be able to actually take over the country. And so when we think about the current Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, and we talk about that transitionary period of him becoming the Prime Minister, it may on the surface feel as if it was a peaceful democratic election. Maybe there was a different process, but in reality, there was a lot of violence within the country. A lot of people were murdered. A lot of people were raped. It was not too far off from what happened in 1991. And so when violence continues to be the answer to power, we will continue to experience atrocities upon atrocities upon atrocities. Ethiopia doesn't have, nor does the continent have a real future when every time there is a transition of power, it's taken violently. We're teaching our children that that's the only way, and so then it continues to be the only way.
We know that the landscape, the political order in Ethiopia is deeply intertwined, so to speak, with the ethno-national federalism. Can you talk to us about this and the role it plays in impacting the current realities?
Sure. So Ethiopia is it's a country with over 100 million citizens. It has over 80 different languages. It has many, many different cultures. And that means that the country in itself is made of a bunch of different nation states. And so Tigray, which is where I'm from and where my family is from, is in itself a nation state, as is the Amhara region, the Afar region. All of these areas are their own nation states. And these nation states are ethnically homogenous. And so the majority of Tigrayans who live in Tigray, or rather, the majority of people who live in Tigray are going to be Tigrayans. It's the same in the Amhara region, the same in any other region within Ethiopia. And so ethnically, we all have our own little areas, and those little areas are run by governments who are ethnically from that area as well. Although, while EPRDF was the government that was in control of Ethiopia, there was a lot of I don't want to say borders because this is a country, so there's no borders within the country, but there were a lot of cross-nation movements. People who were from Addis would go to school in Mekelle, which is the capital of Tigray, or if somebody was from the Harar region, they would go to school in the Somali region. And so there was a lot of overlap based off of ethnicity. It didn't necessarily matter what ethnicity you were. You just, you knew where you came from, but you would go and visit others, and Ethiopia would be Ethiopia, you'd be Ethiopian. But because of the strife that the current prime minister has brought upon the country, that has become a lot less likely to happen. And so you'll see Addis Ababa being a melting pot of different ethnicities, of different Ethiopians. But if you were to go to Tigray now, you're going to see mostly Tigrayans. And that's because a lot of people, a lot of different regions, a lot of different nations within Ethiopia don't feel necessarily safe or comfortable outside of their specific region in this moment.
Talk to us a bit about the controversy around the Constitution. There are talks about secession clauses, power division, checks and balances, and all that. How is this contributing to democratic collapse?
Sure. So, it's kind of hard to see Ethiopia as a democratic country in its current state.
True.
The current prime minister likes to say that he was voted in, but he was, quote unquote, and I'm using quotations, voted in during a time of war. So the entire region of Tigray was not actually able to vote during that time because it was under siege. And if you were to look at other regions of Ethiopia during voting time or during the elections, they weren't also really able to vote. You would find videos of people who were running away, people who were being forced to vote, or voters who voted multiple times. It's pretty corrupt, the system that it's currently in. And so when we're talking about democracy, it's very hard to say Ethiopia is a democratic country. I know that on face it seems that way, and that is something I think ideologically that Ethiopia would like to be. Ethiopians would like to be able to vote, one man, one woman, one person, one vote, but that hasn't happened, and it's currently not happening. And so it's a little hard for me to talk about it in those terms.
Yeah, the issues are deep, complex, and rather complicated. So let's see if we can move towards making suggestions as to how we can step forward. There's been a lot of conversation, and from what I've seen, many analysts are proposing 4 conditions: sustained economic growth, elite commitments to rule, independent institutions, and a little bit of external support are needed to move forward. So which of these is most lacking in Ethiopia right now?
They're all so important and also needed so deeply. It's hard to say which one is the most, but I would say from my personal opinion, when there is a lack of accountability for crimes that have been committed against regular folks just trying to survive every single day, and there's a lack of accountability from the top all the way down, that makes it very, very hard for people to feel as if they can live in a democratic state, if they can feel like they have a vote, or none of that can happen without accountability. When you don't have accountability for the things that you've done to someone, it's very hard for that person who's been the victim, rather, to not have resentment. It's very hard for them to move forward. It's very hard for them to do anything with a clear mind because all they're thinking about is what's happened to them. So as long as Ethiopia has no accountability, rather the Ethiopian government has no accountability for the things that they have done to the citizens of Ethiopia, I don't see any way forward. And so for me, the top priority would be accountability. There's been so much that's happened within Ethiopia in the past 4 years, actually since 2018, but specifically in the past 4 years since the war on Tigray started and so on, that the lack of accountability that Ethiopians face every single day is just, it's very easy for a person from any region, any nation state in Ethiopia to not claim the country, but claim their ethnicity because of what's happened to them. So let's say, for instance, I'm a Tigrayan. I am from Tigray. My family is from Tigray. It's very hard for me to claim Ethiopia when my family has been starved, my sisters, aunts, cousins have been raped, when that has happened over and over and over again. When my little area, which is one of the smallest areas of Ethiopia, has been under siege, it's hard for me to say that I'm Ethiopian. For an Amhara person who is currently being attacked by the Ethiopian government over and over and over through drones and different systems, rape as well as starvation, these are key strategic things that the Ethiopian government under the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has used These are strategic things that he has used, these tools against his own citizens. And these tools I'm mentioning are rape, it's starvation, it's holding under siege different areas. It's also turning off the internet, turning off full telecommunications. It is, the current prime minister has made it so hard to just live a regular life that it's very hard to see.
It's curious that you talked about turning off the internet. That was the conversation in the first half of this program, looking at the situation in Tanzania. But it is what it is, that sometimes, you know, access is denied when it should be free. Let's look at how to rebuild or strengthen institutions, the electoral, judiciary, legislature, so that they can be credible to some degree. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but in your view, is it possible at this moment to strengthen institutions somewhat to begin the process of accountability that you talk about?
Yeah, you know, I'm a generally hopeful person. I tend to see life through rose-colored glasses, if I can say. And I think there's always a time to stop whatever's happening, to maybe rethink. Reforms are important. Conversation is really, really, really important. People need to be able to talk to each other. I think a huge problem for Ethiopia and actually the entire continent is brain drain. It is something that we witness over and over and over and over again. And when brain drain happens in times of war and times of conflict, what we're ending up with is a class of elites and a class of people who have nothing. And when there's no middle class, there's no opportunity, there's no education, there's no nothing. It makes it very hard for a country to grow. And so I'm hoping that the brain drain will essentially end, and that people will be incentivized to stay. People will feel like that there is a future here. I can send my kids to school. I think that is something that is really, really, really important, is that people feel incentivized to stay in their country, to stay within Ethiopia, to stay on the continent and want to grow. A part of that is just, again, dialogue, having conversations with different regions, different ethnicities, people coming together, remembering what it was like before the conflicts were happening, thinking of ways to find a future together. I think economic stability is something that's really, really important and very hard to do in the midst of constant conflict.
Maebel, one of the things you said is lacking is accountability, and you've raised the need quite correctly for dialogue and peace. So I want to ask, how should Ethiopia reconcile the need for peace first with the need for democratic accountability? Which should take priority for for things to really begin to change?
Yeah, you know, I think sometimes things can happen in tangent. Things can happen hand in hand. They don't necessarily have to happen separately. But obviously, peace should come first. Things have to calm down. People have to be able to breathe. People have to be able to eat and feel like they can sleep at night, to then hold each other accountable. It is not just one side that's constantly hurting another. A lot of people have taken part. And so it's accountability is something that is going to take a lot of time. But without accountability, peace is not sustainable. And so although peace may be the very first goal, without accountability, peace is not sustainable. Peace will end very, very quickly. We're seeing it around the world. We're seeing it every single day in different countries. It's not just Ethiopia. It's not just the continent. It is everywhere that we're seeing peace not be sustainable because there is no accountability. Resentment is something that is very serious. When something is done against me, and there is no apology, or there is no justice, or there is no nothing on the other side, I will feel as if nothing really matters about me. I don't matter. And so if I don't matter, why will I care about the future of anywhere around me, let alone society or the country that I'm in? And so peace may be the goal, but without accountability, it's not sustainable.
All right, Maebel, just hold on for a bit. We're going to short break. And when we come back, we'll just have a few more questions and then wrap up the program. Stay with us. Short time, but we'll make the most of it. Maebel, let's just talk about this is somewhat a tired question because of concerns over their credibility and their powers. I'm talking about African Union, the UN, and other external actors, but they still have a role to play as partners, not puppeteers, without undermining democratic ownership in Ethiopia. What role can they play?
You know, I've been a person who's not always said the nicest things about the African Union. I'm sure like many other Africans feel very similar to how I feel. The African Union can be a very frustrating institution. It is, in my opinion, meant to be able to take care of the people of Africa and not necessarily the leaders of Africa, is how I view the African Union. And yet what we see time and time again is that that's not necessarily the case. And that's what we saw in Ethiopia when it came to the many conflicts, wars, and genocides that Ethiopia is facing and has been facing. The African Union has turned a blind eye. It has sided with governments and leaders rather than people. And so that's a really frustrating thing to feel as an Ethiopian, as an African.
I guess so, but I mean, no country is an island. We all need each other somehow. And I mean, we have these bodies for a purpose, even though they seem to fail from some of the analysts I've had on the program. Well, let's move a little further in the short time that we have. How might constitutional reform proceed? Because that's another issue that's contentious.
It is. It definitely is, because the Constitution does have language about secession, and Ethiopia is a country, again, of many nation states, and some of these nation states do feel the need to secede. Eritrea was a part of Ethiopia and actually used the secession option to be able to become its own. And so a lot of these nation states see that and they reference it as a something that they would like to achieve. That has caused Ethiopians who like the country of Ethiopia as a whole to feel very uncomfortable or insecure. And so that is where a lot of the conversation comes from. But again, I have to say, to be a person who comes from a nation state within Ethiopia that does not receive a lot of fair attention, be it financially or academically or in any other form, I can understand as to why they would want to consider secession. It makes sense, you know, but yeah,
it is complicated. I'm told we're out of time for this conversation. So in 40 seconds, if you can, what would be your message to the Ethiopian people amidst all of these challenges that they face?
Sure. So I honestly would just reiterate what you said. We are not an island. We are together in this regardless of whatever happens in the future, what happens today. We will always be neighbors. And so it's better for us to be able to talk to each other and find ways to continue being neighbors, either through interdependence or whatever ways we need to do. We need to be able to work as neighbors. And that means the entire continent, not just Ethiopia, but we all need to be able to work together.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for giving us your time.